We begin with breaking news. Israel's prime minister says the top Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar, has been killed in a military operation in Gaza. Israeli officials say that Sinwar's body was recovered with DNA tests confirming his identity. Sinwar was considered the chief architect behind the Hamas October 7th terror attacks on Israel. Attacks that left more than 1,000 people dead. Attacks that also triggered the war in Gaza, which health officials there say has killed more than 42,000 people. Sinwar took over leadership of the Palestinian militant group back in August after the previous top commander, Ismail Haniyeh, was assassinated. Hamas has not yet commented on the fate of its leader. Well, Sinwar was considered Israel's most wanted target in Gaza. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that his death offers the chance for peace, but he is warning that Israel will continue the war until all hostages held by Hamas are freed.
Today, as promised, we settled the score with Sinwar. Today, evil has suffered a severe blow, but the task before us is not yet complete. To the dear families of the hostages, I say this is an important moment in the war. We will continue with all our strength until the return of all your loved ones, who are also our loved ones.
That was Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. DW correspondent Tania Krämer is in Jerusalem. She told me what else was said in that speech.
Well, I think he had several messages here. I mean, he said, on the one hand, that basically he addressed the Israeli public. He said, they went after Sinwar. They got him finally after this, after looking for him for 1 year. It was one of the key objectives of this war to remove the Hamas leadership. And we've seen this over the course of the war. But he also addressed Gazans there, basically telling them that there is now a time for change. And what was interesting that he called upon those militants that if they would release the hostages, they would be able to leave and be able to live. But he also said again that to the hostage families, and that's quite interesting because we haven't seen any movement in terms of a new ceasefire deal that would also see the release of the remaining hostages. About 100 are still being held in Gaza in recent months. That this was important, a moment now to work on that, to bring them home. I have to say many families here have lost trust in the government to do so. But he also said the war will continue, and I think this is also an important message to hear.
Tania, the Israeli Prime Minister, he's drawn a lot of criticism outside of Israel, but also within Israel for this war, for how long it's taking, also for the fact that not all of the hostages have been freed. What does Sinwar's death then mean for Netanyahu?
Well, I think it's certainly seen for many a major achievement. He is considered the mastermind of the October 7 terror attack. So most of the Israeli public will not shed a tear that Yahya Sinwar was killed. And of course, this is an achievement by Netanyahu. It took a year, however, and by the military. But of course, the question is now what comes next and what is the intent of Netanyahu. We heard it a bit, the war is not over, still saying there needs to be, the Israeli public needs to be resilient. This is not over yet. So it doesn't really give us an indication whether we will be any closer of any ceasefire or hostage deal. And he also said time and time again that he actually wants to reshape the power of balance in the whole region. We are seeing also, of course, there's in the conflict with Hezbollah. We also, of course, have to hear from Hamas yet. They haven't really spoken publicly yet, what they intend to do with this news.
Netanyahu had declared Yahya Sinwar public enemy number one after the October terror attacks. I mean, what do we know about Sinwar as a person and as a leader? Or what did we know?
Well, he became now the overall leader for Hamas after Ismail Haniyeh, who was one of the Hamas leaders, also from Gaza, but he was in the past years, he was outside of Gaza. He was killed in targeted assassination in Tehran in July. And then a couple of weeks later, Yahya Sinwar was declared the leader of Hamas. Sinwar is originally from Khan Yunis. He joined Hamas early on, already in the 80s. He was in prison for a very long time in Israel, and he actually came free after a prisoner exchange in 2011 that came after Hamas took a soldier captive in 2006. It was the Gilad Shalit prisoner deal. He was there with Hamas for several years. In 2011, Sinwar was among the about 1,000 Palestinian prisoners were released, and then he rose in the ranks of Hamas as Hamas leader. Then in Gaza, he was still even in Gaza a rather elusive figure. But still a military leader also in Gaza. Now what is left, of course, now is a question, what will Hamas do next and who will basically replace him?
Tania, we're just hearing Israel's army radio is saying that the killing of Sinwar occurred during a ground operation in the city of Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip. That just coming across. Let me ask you, what consequences could his death have for the situation in Gaza and the broader Middle East?
Well, this is certainly still to see. I mean, we're waiting also now to hear from Hamas, some public statement from them on the killing of Yahya Sinwar. As in the past, I mean, we've seen many leaders of Hamas being killed or assassinated by Israel. They were always able to replace them rather quickly. Now we're seeing also or hearing here from a lot of people that Hamas certainly has been weakened, at least militarily. Now, this is one thing, but of course, you also want to know from Palestinians in Gaza. I mean, they will be asking tonight, what does it really mean for them? We have, of course, those who support Hamas, but there are many, many of those who do not support Hamas in Gaza, and they want to see what does it mean for them. They've been endured a war for over 12 months. We've just seen another ground operation in northern Gaza, in the Jabalia refugee camp there. We've seen a really harsh situation, humanitarian situation for people. And they certainly want to have these questioned answers, but many would say there might not be that much change. We've seen over the course of this war other leaders being assassinated and killed, and not much really has changed for civilians on the ground there.
DW correspondent Tania Krämer with the latest tonight from Jerusalem. Tania, as always, thank you. Yahya Sinwar became the political chief of Hamas just over 2 months ago, but he spent decades building up the Palestinian militant group with the goal of eradicating Israel. His career included a long stint in an Israeli prison for orchestrating a spate of murders. He was seen as a hardliner who pushed the group to more violent means, leading to the October 7th terror attacks on Israel.
Yahya Sinwar was Hamas's top boss, both inside and out of Gaza. Born in the Khan Yunis refugee camp in 1962, his parents had been forced from their homes when the State of Israel was formed. Sinwar went on to study at the Islamic University of Gaza and earned a bachelor's degree in Arabic. He joined Hamas during its beginnings in the late 1980s, around the time of the First Intifada, or Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation. Back then, he led a security network which tracked down Palestinians accused of collaborating with Israel. Sinwar was jailed by Israel in 1988 for planning the abduction and murder of 2 Israeli soldiers and the murder of 4 Palestinians. He was locked up for 23 years. While in prison, he learned fluent Hebrew and gained a deep knowledge of Israel. Eventually released in 2011, he was one of more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners exchanged for 1 Israeli soldier. Having served as a commander of Hamas's military wing, Sinwar was elected as the group's Gaza leader in 2017. Considered a hardliner, he issued this threat while speaking to crowds in Gaza in December 2022.
We will come to you, God willing, in a roaring flood. We will come to you with an endless number of rockets. We will come to you in a flood of soldiers without limit. We will come to you with millions of our nation, tide after tide.
Israel deemed Sinwar to be the chief planner of the October 7th terror attacks, which killed 1,200 people and resulted in more than 250 others being taken hostage.
The one who decided on this despicable act was Yahya Sinwar, the ruler of the Gaza Strip. Therefore he and all those under him are dead men walking. We will attack them, dismantle them. We will dismantle their whole system.
Sinwar was promoted to Hamas's political chief when the former leader, Ismail Haniyeh, was assassinated in Iran in July 2024. Israel hunted Sinwar relentlessly, targeting the extensive underground tunnel network he helped to develop under Gaza and where he hid from Israel's attacks.
Well, for more, I'm joined now by Harel. He's a historian and expert on Palestinian affairs at the Moshe Dayan Center at Tel Aviv University. It's good to have you with us tonight. How does Sinwar's death change the dynamic in the Middle East? I mean, what are the chances of us seeing an end to Israel's war in Gaza sooner rather than later?
Well, Yahya Sinwar changed the whole structure of Hamas to be extremely centralized. It was a decentralized organization with many leaders or power center, influential ones, and it became in the recent year a very centralized organization around his own character, personality as the sole decision maker. He was the main barrier to a hostage deal and obviously for halting the war. As the Secretary of State spokesperson declared today, he refused again and again to any deal. And I think removing him out of the map opens a lot of hope for both Israelis and Palestinians to finish this war, to get our hostages back, and to look forward with a lot of hope.
This can certainly be seen as a major victory for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. How will Sinwar's death impact support inside Israel for the Prime Minister?
Well, I mean, the killing of Sinwar is obviously supported from left to right, all the way, including radical left, by the way, which are usually highly critical to Israel, the war. But everybody agrees that this guy was a mass murderer, and his removal might change the whole situation for better. However, we don't know how will Hamas behave now as an organization. With centralized the organization like Hamas in recent year, once you decapitate it, you know, the whole question of how the body will act after it is a major question. There's a major question mark above it. However, we knew that with Sinwar we cannot move forward, so it remains that it is. As for Netanyahu, I think politically, yeah, obviously some people will say it's you know, will strengthening politically, but you know, the trauma is so deep. And the thing with Netanyahu, at least for major parts of the Israeli society, is such a big deal. I mean, their criticism, that I don't see it changing the political map fundamentally. Little bit in favor, but not necessarily fundamentally.
Is there anyone that you see as the most likely successor to Sinwar as the new leader of Hamas?
Well, it won't be easy for them. You have, of course, Muhammad Sinwar, the brother of Yahya Sinwar, who is, I would say, key commander or key leader within the military group of Ezzeddin al-Qassam, but he's not accepted or well-known figure in the political scene, and not necessarily accepted by the Hamas supporters. So it's not such a. I mean, we cannot say that it will just go through, just like that. It might be quite an issue. However, Sinwar's deputy, Khalil El-Khaya, might be a candidate. Khalid Mashal also, although Khalid Mashal has his own problems, particularly with Iran. He's not accepted on Iran. But Khalil El-Khaya, from all those three candidates, I think he has the best chances.
Okay. Harel Chorev joining us tonight from Tel Aviv. Mr. Chorev, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Good night.
Our coverage continues now with Natasha Hall. She is a senior fellow with the Middle East program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. It's good to have you with us. U.S. President Joe Biden said in a statement earlier this evening that with Sinwar gone, Hamas is no longer capable of carrying out another October 7th attack on Israel. Is he correct?
No. I don't know how many times the United States needs to learn this lesson, but decapitating leadership of a group with an ideology like Hamas does not destroy the group. They always regrow, they rebuild. This is the case with Hezbollah. This is the case with Hamas. This is the case with groups all over the world if the drivers of conflict that they build from remain. So I think that they are degraded, but they were degraded to begin with. Gaza has been completely annihilated, as have Hamas leadership. So it's significantly degraded. But I would have to say, if anyone has been paying attention to the news for the past year, I think whatever will grow instead will be far worse than Sinwar.
Israel confirmed tonight that there were no hostages with Sinwar when Sinwar was killed. We have been led to believe for the past year that Sinwar was always with some of the hostages as a form of protection. The fact that he was not with any hostages, is there a message there? I mean, how do you read that?
Yes, we've been told for a full year that he's somewhere in an underground bunker surrounded by hostages to protect himself. And instead, he was in a tactical vest fighting with his soldiers. And so I think that also points to another issue. This man, who by all accounts was a sociopath, has now been made an inspirational martyr to millions. And so that goes against what Israel's been telling us, but it might also show a bit of desperation on the part of Sinwar, who may have thought that his end was coming soon in any case.
So what about realistically expecting an end to this war or a ceasefire sooner rather than later? Can we realistically expect that now with Sinwar out of the picture?
Well, I don't share the optimism of your previous guests, because Benny Gantz and Netanyahu have both come out almost immediately saying the war will continue for years to come. So it is unclear to me how Sinwar's death changes very much. We've already heard from Israeli leaders what they plan on doing. And so I don't suspect there will be any kind of significant ceasefire now. It is not even clear to me who from Hamas would agree to a ceasefire at this point. But clearly Israel is winning this tactical victory. But again, I don't see the sort of the long-term strategy here.
Is there any reason tonight to expect any of the remaining hostages in Gaza to be freed or to be brought home alive?
I mean, that's the ultimate question. And it's not clear to me because we don't know what the line of decision making is within Hamas now. You could just as easily see hostages released, or you could see a bunch of people who are subordinate to Sinwar not really knowing what to do and hence not releasing the hostages. So I think we are in a fairly similar place to where we were just a couple of days ago, unfortunately.
What about the wider Middle East? What could leaders in Iran now be thinking, considering the fact that they have lost yet another ally?
Yeah, Iran has been significantly degraded in terms of its proxies. If we are looking at what's happening in Lebanon right now, and obviously what has been happening in Gaza, their proxies have been a form of deterrence for them and a very successful a form of deterrence. I would not count them down and out, though. They still have quite a bit of territory from the Mediterranean all the way to Iran to recuperate in through various proxy networks and groups. Hezbollah as well has a global network, financial network for drugs and arms smuggling. So I would count them down, but not out. Let's put it that way. The other thing is that they might turn to a different form of deterrence, which is their nuclear program. And they may accelerate that program given the weakening of its proxies.
Natasha Hall with the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. We appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
U.S. President Joe Biden issued a statement from onboard Air Force One this evening, calling Sinwar's death a good day for the world. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris has also commented at a campaign event in Milwaukee. Take a listen.
Today, Israel confirmed that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, is dead, and justice has been served. And the United States, Israel, and the entire world are better off as a result. Sinwar was responsible for the killing of thousands of innocent people, including the victims of October 7 and hostages killed in Gaza. He had American blood on his hands. Today, I can only hope that the families of the victims of Hamas feel a sense and measure of relief.
Well, DW's Washington Bureau Chief Ines Pohl, she's been following Kamala Harris's press conference for us. Ines, we just heard Harris say that Sinwar had American blood on his hands, referring to the American victims of the October 7th terror attack. What does Sinwar's death then mean for Washington and its role in the Middle East conflict?
Well, you know, Brent, as we just also heard from your other guests, the big question really is here as all around the world, I guess, if this is kind of the off-ramp for the possibility of ending the war and bringing the hostages home, including the remaining American hostages. And this, of course, is nearly impossible to answer at this moment, because there is no doubt that this is a significant event and really a considerable blow to Hamas. Every expert kind of says so, and many Americans here in the United States really resonate with the comparison to Osama bin Laden even. However, I think it is far too early to say that this represents a real opportunity to move toward a ceasefire, also because the question remains, as we heard before, with whom will Israel, will the United States negotiate all these deals now as the top leader is killed?
We are now about 3 weeks away from the presidential election in the U.S. The war in Gaza has been a big topic for some voters. Could today's development, could it influence them at all when they go to the ballot box?
It was definitely no coincidence that Kamala Harris took the stage to comment on this success. She positioned herself not only as a strong, effective and competent leader of the free world, but also, of course, wanted to justify the ongoing support for Israel. As you just mentioned, this support is viewed critical, especially among the important group of young voters. So the question here is, will this killing be enough to silence silence the critical voices, honestly, I doubt it. If Israel, with the support of the US, is not able to free the hostages and conduct a ceasefire in the next 10, 12 days, I think dissent will just continue.
Our very own Ines Pohl in Washington. Ines, as always, thank you.